I occupied a lot of his time. I mean, he had an affinity toward me. You know, he had a great care for me.
We did. We had a really close relationship.
We thought we had the story. We thought we saw it all. But this new interview changes everything. I was just a girl. I didn't know what I was stepping into. Really? Because just months ago, in an entirely different interview, she said, I was mature for my age. I knew what I wanted. And I wanted Elvis. Caught again in a contradiction. And this time it's not subtle, it's strategic.
Snack bar. It wasn't really a snack bar. It was just a place where a lot of the people would used to go and have hamburgers and Cokes or whatever. Mm-hmm. And a gentleman came up to me and asked if I'd like to meet Elvis. And I thought he was kidding and said, sure.
Welcome back to the channel. If you've been following our breakdowns, you already know the smoke and mirrors we uncovered in her previous statements about Elvis, about how they met, when they started seeing each other, and how her carefully crafted innocence just doesn't line up with documented timelines, lie detector tests, or eyewitness accounts. But this time it's worse. This new interview, the one you're about to see, doesn't just conflict with earlier ones. It rewrites them. Why is that important? Because when someone rewrites the past, especially when they're profiting off that story, you have to ask, was it ever about truth or just control? In this interview, Priscilla downplays her influence, paints herself as a passive girl swept up in Elvis's fame. But then, not even 2 minutes later, she describes her time at Graceland with a level of confidence, control, and planning that sounds nothing like the naive 14-year-old we keep hearing about. This is the same woman who served as executive producer of the Priscilla film.
Started calling me and kept the relationship going. And I'd hoped to see him again, but I didn't see him until 1962 when he called and asked my parents if they would allow me to go over there and see him.
Film. She had final say on every word, every scene, every portrayal of Elvis. And yet the inconsistencies continue. Why? Are these innocent lapses in memory or intentional contradictions meant to reshape a legacy? We're going to walk through this new interview, clip by clip, claim by claim, and compare it directly to previous footage, book excerpts, court records, and yes, the infamous Curry Grant lie detector results she still avoids talking about publicly. What she said, what the records show, and why this version, just like the last one, doesn't hold up under the weight of history, so buckle up. This isn't just another celebrity recap. This is a pattern, and it's time someone called it out.
Kissing women in the crowd on the lips than he did singing. I mean, was that difficult to watch?
Yeah.
Because to understand why this new interview is so explosive, we have to look back at what Priscilla Presley already told the world. In fact, we don't even have to dig far. Just pull up her own words from that 1980 interview. It was all very innocent. A friend of his approached me in Germany and said Elvis wanted to meet me. I thought it was a joke. That's the narrative. Sweet, spontaneous, harmless. A 14-year-old military daughter sitting in a snack bar in Wiesbaden, Germany. Elvis, the world's most famous man, just happens to want to meet her. Her parents were cautious but ultimately trusted the situation. Then she's swept into his orbit. The rest is history. That version of events doesn't match multiple eyewitness reports, or even her own book, Elvis and Me, which conveniently tiptoes around specific details, and it especially doesn't line up with the book Child Bride, which was based on court records, testimonies, and verified lie detector tests. He was stationed in Germany at the same time. According to Child Bride, it wasn't Elvis's friend who approached Priscilla, it was the other way around. Priscilla allegedly approached Curry herself and asked to be introduced to Elvis, and that's just the start. According to Curry, who passed a polygraph test on these claims, Priscilla was coached on how to appeal to Elvis, what to say, how to dress, what not to say. He had an affinity toward me. He said I was different, quiet. Exactly what Curry claimed she was told to act like. Coincidence? The polygraph examiner concluded Curry was truthful in every answer. Priscilla found deceptive on nearly every key question, except one, which had nothing to do with her early relationship with Elvis. And yet she keeps repeating the same origin story, like we'd never looked deeper. Like no one's comparing receipts. This isn't just about a memory lapse. It's about a public narrative carefully sculpted over decades and reshaped every time a new interview drops. What she told us then doesn't hold up now. And in the next section, we'll break down exactly what she said this time and why it throws her entire past into question. Stick around. The contradictions are about to get sharper. In this newly resurfaced interview, filmed just recently, Priscilla Presley once again steps in front of the camera. The setting, calm, intimate. That signature soft-spoken tone, almost like she's reading a bedtime story, except this one's designed to rewrite her past. I was just a young girl. I didn't understand what I was getting into. Elvis had all the power. I was just trying to survive. Now pause. That's not the same voice from the 1980 interview. That's not the confident woman who said, "He cared deeply for me. I wanted to be there. I knew I was different." I knew I was different. It's a complete shift from participant to passenger, from choice to consequence, from romantic interest to reluctant victim. Because when you line this interview up against her actions, not just her words, the whole powerless girl persona starts to unravel. In this interview, she implies she moved to Graceland under pressure, that she was young, vulnerable, and didn't have a say. But court records and biographies show she was nearly 18, traveled with her parents' permission, and continued school while living in Elvis's mansion. Not to mention, she was reportedly writing him letters for years, pleading to be brought over. She spent years presenting herself as the calm center of the Elvis storm, the stable one, the protector of his image. But in this new telling, she recasts herself as the misunderstood girl, almost helpless, almost trapped, almost abused. That's a very different brand. And it's not accidental. It aligns too perfectly with the modern narrative wave of retrospective victimhood, where the actions of the past are reinterpreted through today's lens. No one is denying the complexities of their relationship. Elvis was 24. She was 14 when they met. That age gap alone deserves scrutiny. But when Priscilla goes from celebrated biographer to silent sufferer, only when the press starts digging again, it makes people feel something else. Because if this was the truth all along, why the decades of a different story? Why wait until she had control of her own film, her own narrative, to make the shift? What changed? The timing isn't random, the tone isn't spontaneous, and the contradictions, they're mounting. Priscilla was born in May of 1945. She met Elvis in September 1959. She was 14, he was 24. She moved to Graceland in March of 1963. That made her just 2 months shy of her 18th birthday. They married in 1967. She was 21. I was 16 when I moved in. Not to marry him, just to go to school. I didn't really have a choice. Hold on, almost 16, born in May 45, moved in March 63. That's not almost 16, that's almost 18. This isn't the first time her story has conveniently rounded numbers down or used vague language like a just a girl, a still in school, or a barely out of childhood. This is what we call narrative drift, where the facts don't change, but the framing does. Why? Because almost 18A sounds like agency, almost 16E sounds like vulnerability, and this is not a case of fading memory, it's a pattern. Because she's told this story, on record, in at least 3 different ways. In Elvis and Me, she presents herself as emotionally mature, choosing to go. In a 1985 interview, she said her parents had trusted Elvis completely and felt she was safe. In the latest interview, suddenly she was too young to understand what was happening. In Child Bride, it's revealed that Priscilla's parents signed legal documents for her to move across the world, and she wasn't kidnapped, she was authorized. Yet in these new narratives, we're supposed to believe she was whisked away, powerless. So which is it? Because if the timeline is that easy to verify and still being misrepresented, what else is being reshaped? If we can't trust the age, if we can't trust the move-in date, if we can't trust simple math, then why should we trust any of it? The truth is, these aren't just harmless mistakes, they're strategic edits, and they only show up when it benefits the new narrative. In the next section, we'll expose the real power dynamic behind all this, because it turns out Priscilla wasn't just telling her story, she was producing it. And because in 2023, she made her boldest move yet. Not just as a storyteller, but as a story shaper. That title? Executive producer? It means she wasn't just consulted, she wasn't just interviewed, she had final approval, she helped shape the script, she reviewed scenes, she approved the edits, and yet the film paints her as almost entirely powerless. A child with no agency, a wife silenced by stardom, a shadow in the presence of a man too big for her world. She didn't, because she helped write it. So this isn't just a retelling. This is a strategic rebranding. It's remembrance, weaponized as narrative control. Scenes show him rejecting her opinions, isolating her from friends, denying her personal freedom. It's the kind of framing that decades ago would have been unthinkable. Priscilla didn't just ride that wave, she produced it. And that changes everything. Because when you watch the film and then listen to her latest interviews, you realize something chilling. Even her emotional cadence matches the film, which begs the question, was the film an expression of truth she'd been suppressing for decades? Or was it the launchpad for a carefully curated, a final draft of her legacy? Why shift the story now when Elvis is no longer here to speak for himself? Why downplay her own agency just as public interest in reevaluating celebrity relationships is at an all-time high? And why take full creative control if she really just wanted to tell her side? And Priscilla wielded it with precision. She's not the powerless teenage girl anymore. She's the gatekeeper of the Elvis narrative. And guess what? That makes her version more suspect, not less. When someone has something to gain, emotionally, financially, publicly, their story should be examined with more skepticism, not blind acceptance. So the next time you hear her say, "I was just a girl," remember that a girl now signs checks, approves scripts, and controls how millions of people remember Elvis Presley. And that's not a small detail. That's the power move of a master storyteller, or a master manipulator. If there's one name Priscilla Presley probably wishes the public would forget, it's Cary Grant. Not a rock star, not a family member, just a quiet witness stationed in Germany. A man with a story, a man who passed a polygraph test, and yet you'll never hear his name in her interviews, not once. Not in Elvis and Me, not in the film Priscilla, not in her press tours, TV appearances, or magazine spreads. Why? Cary Grant claimed that Priscilla approached him in Germany, not the other way around. Asking for an introduction to Elvis, he said she strategized. She asked what Elvis liked, how to behave, how to present herself. He said she wanted in. Not long after sharing his story publicly, Priscilla sued him for defamation. But here's the part that no one ever addresses. She didn't make him pay. There was no retraction. There was instead a quiet settlement and then silence. He was found truthful on all of them. And Priscilla? She failed nearly every key question during her test, except one, which had nothing to do with Cary or Elvis, and still no one talks about this. Why? Because it suggests that maybe, just maybe, the original story wasn't a wide-eyed teenage love tale, but a carefully designed entry into fame, status, and eventual control. Cary Grant is gone now. He never got his rebuttal. His version of events lives only in scattered interviews and fading book pages. So before we let someone erase that version from history completely, ask yourself, why silence him? Why scrub his name from every retelling? Because if his story had no truth, why was it worth suing over? So now that we've seen it all, her interviews, her timelines, her film, her silence, her contradictions, we have to ask the question out loud, because forgetting what year something happened is one thing, but reshaping your entire role in most famous relationships in history while profiting off it at every stage, that's not forgetfulness, that's a strategy. Think about what we've uncovered together. A love story that starts as a fate, later reframed as a grooming. A move-in date misrepresented by 2 whole years. A man, Cary Grant, completely erased from her public version, despite passing a polygraph. Executive producer power used not to show the truth, but to show her truth, and yet she continues to speak as if her memory is sacred. As if every new telling is a finally honest. But if every version keeps shifting, when does the truth stop moving? Loudspeaker, if you're someone who values Elvis's legacy, not just as a fan, but as a student of his humanity, his mistakes, his complexities, then you should be furious at how this version is being rewritten, one soft interview at a time. Do you believe this is just a matter of aging memory? Yuck. Or has Priscilla Presley intentionally rewritten history to serve her brand, her movie, and her image? Speech balloon, we read every comment. We're building a timeline of what's being changed, and you can help expose it. Send it to those who still think the Priscilla movie was gospel truth. Let's flood the conversation with fact, not soft focus fantasy. Because trust us, this isn't over. Firecracker, there's still more she's hiding, And next time we'll bring those pieces to light.